All right, welcome. Today we're going to dive into two really powerful biblical books that, when you put them together, they tell this one incredible story. It's a story that kicks off with a super urgent warning and lands on this just awe-inspiring vision of who's really in charge. So let's start right here with this intense plea from the Book of Jude. The author Jude basically says, hey, I wanted to write to you all about our amazing shared salvation, but I can't. Something so dangerous was happening that he had to completely switch gears. He had to tell them to fight, to earnestly contend for what they believed. So you got to ask, what on earth was so bad that it demanded a response like that? Here's the heart of the problem. Jude isn't some gentle, friendly letter you'd read on a quiet afternoon. No, this thing is an emergency broadcast. It's like a fire alarm, blaring that the danger isn't just coming, it's already inside the building. And here's the threat he's talking about. Jude says these people have crept in unawares, which means they were insiders, not some outside enemy. This was a problem from within. And what were they doing? Well, according to Jude, they were taking the beautiful idea of God's grace and twisting it into a free pass to do whatever they wanted, to live immorally. And by doing that, they were totally denying the ultimate authority of Jesus Christ. Now, Jude does not hold back when he describes these guys. He just unleashes this storm of powerful metaphors from nature to paint a picture of just how corrupt and dangerous they are. Let's take a look. So Jude's first metaphor, wow, it is devastating. Just imagine you're in a parched, dry land, desperate for rain. You look up, you see clouds, a promise of life, right? But these clouds are empty. They just float on by, giving you nothing. That, Jude says, is exactly what these teachers are like. They look promising, but they deliver nothing but emptiness. And he just keeps going. This next image is just as brutal. He says they're like trees in the fall that not only have no fruit, but are already dead and have been ripped right out of the ground. There's no life in them, and there's zero hope of any life in the future. It's a picture of complete and total spiritual death. This one really highlights the chaos they create. See, these guys aren't quiet about it. They're like raging waves in a storm, loud, destructive, and all they do is churn up their own shameful actions for everyone to see. And he wraps it up with this final, truly chilling image. Back then, sailors used the stars to navigate. A wandering star, probably a comet or a meteor, was totally unpredictable. You couldn't rely on it. It would just lead you astray. And that's what these teachers do. And their own final destination? Not light, but eternal darkness. But Jude doesn't just stop with metaphors. To really drive home how serious this is, he points back through history. He basically argues that God has a very long, very clear track record of judging exactly this kind of rebellion. He pulls out three massive examples from their shared history. First, the Israelites who God saved from Egypt, but who were then destroyed in the wilderness because they didn't believe. Second, the angels who rebelled and are now literally being held in chains for judgment. And third, the infamous cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, wiped out for their immorality. The message couldn't be clearer. God judges rebellion, period. It doesn't matter who you are. And then he gets even more specific, almost like a doctor diagnosing a disease. He uses three famous figures from the Old Testament to pinpoint what's wrong. He says these false teachers are walking in the way of Cain, driven by envy. They're running after the error of Balaam, motivated by greed, and they're going to perish in the rebellion of Korah, which was all about challenging God's chosen authority. He's laying out their spiritual sickness with historical precision. So this brings us to the real nail-biter of a question, right? Jude has painted this terrifying picture of chaos, of a church being eaten away from the inside. It makes you wonder, if all of this is happening, who is actually in control? And to get the answer, our story has to pivot from Jude's warning to a mind-blowing vision given to the Apostle John. So now our setting changes completely. We leave that community in crisis and we travel to this lonely, rocky island out in the Aegean Sea called Patmos. This is where the Apostle John is in exile, suffering, as he says, for the word of God and for the testimony of Jesus Christ. And it's right here, on this prison island, that John gets a direct revelation from the risen Jesus Christ. And this vision, it isn't just for him. It's a message that has to be written down and sent to 7 real churches. Churches that were dealing with the very same kinds of false teaching and turmoil that Jude was screaming about. John hears a voice behind him that sounds like a trumpet. And when he turns around, what he sees is the climax of our whole story. It is the ultimate picture of divine authority, power, and presence. What John sees is this figure of just overwhelming majesty. His hair is pure white. His eyes are like flames of fire. His feet glow like superheated brass. His voice roars like a waterfall. And out of his mouth comes a sharp, two-edged sword. I mean, this is a vision designed to leave no doubt, absolutely no doubt about who is in charge. Okay, so this is packed with symbolism, right? Let's decode it real quick. The white hair, that points to his purity and his eternal nature. Those eyes of fire, that's his all-knowing gaze that sees right into every heart. The feet of brass, that shows the unshakable foundation of his judgment. The voice like rushing waters, that's the immense power behind his words. And that two-edged sword represents the piercing truth and justice that he commands. Now, what's really cool is that Christ himself explains two of the biggest symbols in the vision. First, those 7 stars in his right hand. He says they're the angels, or messengers, of the 7 churches. What does that mean? It means he is holding the church's leadership securely in his hand. It's a symbol of both his power over them and his protection of them. And the second mystery, the 7 golden candlesticks. He reveals they are the 7 churches. And notice where he's standing, right in the middle of them. He's not far off and disconnected. No, he is present. He is walking among them, seeing everything. And this is where our 2 stories just crash into each other. That terrifying warning we got from Jude finds its absolute, definitive answer in this glorious vision from Revelation. So let's put it all together. You have Jude sounding the alarm. Hey, there's corruption inside the gates. You have to fight for your faith. And then you have Revelation giving the ultimate assurance. Yes, there are problems, but the all-knowing, all-powerful Christ is walking right there among you. He sees the false teachers. He's holding the true leaders. Nothing gets past him, and he has the final word. And you know, the book of Jude doesn't actually end on a note of fear. It's so perfect. After laying out all of those threats and dangers, Jude ends by pointing to the one who is actually able to keep his people from falling and bring them home safely. It is the perfect bookend to this whole story of a dire warning and ultimately an unshakable assurance.
Imagine for a second, right, that you're sitting down to write a really warm, encouraging letter to a group of your peers. You know, you've got your tea, you're feeling reflective, and you're ready to just outline all these core values you share in common.
Setting a nice, peaceful scene.
Exactly. It's pleasant. But then, halfway through drafting this nice note, you realize there's a massive, stealthy emergency happening right under your nose.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the pleasantries just vanish. You drop the pen, you hit the fire alarm, and suddenly you are writing a survival manual.
It is the ultimate literary rug pull to go from this serene pastoral greeting to a blaring siren in the space of like a single sentence is incredibly jarring.
And that exact whiplash is what we were exploring in today's deep dive. Welcome in, by the way. Today we're looking at a really intense piece of historical source material.
Very intense.
We're digging into the Book of Jude, specifically chapter 1 from the King James Version. And we're bringing in its accompanying historical commentary too. Our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack this rapid-fire letter. It was written by Jude, who identifies himself as a servant of Jesus Christ and the brother of James.
Right.
We want to uncover how this ancient text basically functions as a 2,000-year-old warning system against a very specific kind of internal threat.
Yeah, and to really grasp the gravity of that warning, you have to look at the sort of psychological baseline Jude establishes right before he sounds the alarm.
That opening is so important.
It is. He addresses a target audience of believers who are, quoting here, sanctified by God the Father, preserved in Jesus Christ, and called.
It sounds so secure.
Exactly. He follows that up by wishing that mercy, peace, and love be multiplied unto them. So he's laying down this foundation of absolute cosmic security for you.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because right after that warm embrace, Jude explicitly states his original plan was to write to them about the common salvation.
Yeah, the nice letter.
Right, the nice unifying letter. But then he says it became needful for him to totally pivot. He's suddenly exhorting this audience to earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered unto the saints.
What's fascinating here is the mechanism of the threat that actually forces that pivot.
Yeah, what changed his mind?
Well, when we study historical threats to early religious communities, the danger usually comes with a loud announcement, right? Like an emperor's edict of persecution or an invading army.
Right, something very obvious.
But Jude's emergency doesn't look like that at all. He writes, For there are certain men crept in unawares.
Crept in unawares. That is such a chilling phrase.
It really is.
It makes me think of like a system exploit. If you think about the networks you rely on every day, right?
Ah,
Your workplace, your community orgs, or even just your digital ecosystem.
sure.
A malware virus doesn't usually announce itself by smashing your screen with a hammer.
No, it hides.
Right. It disguises itself as a legitimate file. It gets inside the system, and it starts rewriting the code from within. And Jude gives us the exact malicious code these infiltrators are using. He says they are turning the grace of our God into lasciviousness.
Which is, the commentary breaks down the sociology of that tactic quite well.
How so?
Well, these false teachers, they aren't launching a frontal assault on the community's theology. They're not saying, your beliefs are wrong.
Oh, so they're agreeing with it on the surface.
Exactly. Instead, they're lowering the belief system into just a mere outward profession. By turning grace into lasciviousness, they're weaponizing the community's own core tenet against it.
Wow.
They're taking the promise of divine forgiveness and they're twisting it into a permanent loophole for unrestrained behavior.
So, like, they're claiming the ultimate rewards of this system, which is eternal life, while actively hollowing out the obligations of personal holiness that actually hold the community together.
Yes. And because they're operating from inside the house, wearing the uniform of the community, Jude can't just issue a mild disagreement.
Right, you can't just be like, I politely differ.
Exactly. If you politely debate an infiltrator, you are subtly signaling to your audience that both sides have valid points.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
So Jude has to bypass debate entirely and demonstrate the catastrophic stakes of this internal rebellion.
Which leads him to build what looks like, honestly, a cosmic hall of shame.
A very apt description.
He just rapid fires through these historical and celestial precedents to show that this kind of infiltration isn't just, a localized annoyance. It is a recurring systemic rot that always ends in destruction.
Yeah. And he begins with the Israelites. He points out that the Lord saved the people out of the land of Egypt, but afterward destroyed those who believed not.
So he's directly attacking their main selling point.
Precisely. The false teachers are telling the community, hey, we're in the group, we have grace, we're safe no matter what we do.
We've got the golden ticket.
Right. But Jude uses the Exodus generation to prove that past deliverance is not a permanent shield against future judgment if you pivot into rebellion.
I see where he's going with that. But then he scales it up in a way that feels incredibly abrupt. Like he goes from human history to celestial history.
He really does.
He brings up angels who kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation. And he says they're now reserved in everlasting chains under darkness until the judgment day.
The connection between the human and celestial examples there, it really lies in the violation of boundaries.
Okay, how do you mean?
Well, the angels who left their habitation, they abandoned their assigned roles and their jurisdictions for prohibited desires.
Ah, I see.
And that is the exact same mechanism driving the infiltrators. They are abandoning the boundaries of the faith delivered to the saints in favor of their own lusts.
Oh, that makes sense.
And Jude follows this by mentioning Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Cities that gave themselves over to fornication and went after strange flesh, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire.
So the pattern is definitely clear here. God rescues, but God also punishes boundary-breaking rebellion.
Yes.
But Jude doesn't stop with just whole groups or cities. He zooms in on three very specific individuals. He names Cain, Balaam, and Kor.
Right.
The text says these infiltrators have gone in the way of Cain and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward and perished in the gainsaying of Kor.
Those three names are incredibly deliberate. They represent three distinct pillars of spiritual corruption.
Break those down for me.
Sure. So the way of Cain represents approaching religion entirely on your own self-righteous terms, right? And then responding with toxic jealousy when it isn't accepted.
Okay, and Balaam.
The error of Balaam is essentially the monetization of spiritual influence.
Oh, like a grifter.
Exactly. Balaam was a prophet who tried to sell his spiritual gifts to the highest bidder, prioritizing personal profit over divine truth.
Wow.
And finally, you have the gainsaying, or the rebellion of Kor, also known as Korah. Korah led a mutiny against Moses, basically arguing, hey, all the congregation is holy, we don't need your authority. It was a populist uprising designed to tear down legitimate structure.
When you lay it out like that, it perfectly mirrors the profile of these false teachers. I mean, they're self-righteous like Cain, they're grifting the community for advantage like Balaam, and they're disrespecting legitimate authority like Kor.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, Because right after this incredibly grounded sociological breakdown of how grifters operate, Jude throws in what I genuinely think is the most confusing verse in the entire text.
Ah, verse 9.
Yes, verse 9. He suddenly starts talking about Michael the archangel contending with the devil, disputing over the body of Moses.
It's quite a shift.
I have to admit, I got completely lost here. Like, why inject a bizarre cosmic legal battle over a corpse into a survival guide about local church infiltrators? It feels like Jude just wanted to flex some esoteric trivia.
I totally understand why it feels like a massive tangent. But the inclusion isn't actually about the dispute itself. It's about the mechanism of jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction.
Yeah. Look at how Michael handles the conflict. Michael is an archangel. He's a being of immense, terrifying cosmic power.
Right.
Yet the text points out that when arguing with the devil, Michael durst not bring against him a railing accusation. He simply says, "The Lord rebuke thee."
Wait, really?
Yeah.
So an entity with enough power to literally battle the devil refuses to insult him on his own authority?
Precisely. Because Michael respects the hierarchy of dominion. He defers to the ultimate judge.
Oh, wow.
He restrains his own power out of reverence for the divine order. Now, contrast that staggering restraint with the behavior of these infiltrators, who Jude actually calls filthy dreamers.
Ah, I see it now. The text says, these dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities.
Exactly. They lack any sense of reverence. While an archangel refuses to step outside his jurisdictional boundaries, these human infiltrators arrogantly mock spiritual realities they don't even comprehend.
That's a huge contrast.
And the commentary notes the profound irony here. You have the highest of angels showing the deepest humility, while the lowest of deceivers shows the highest arrogance.
And Jude just doubles down on their ignorance, too. He says they speak evil of things they know not, and what they do know naturally, they know as brute beasts, and in those things, they corrupt themselves.
Yeah, that's harsh.
It really is. They're essentially operating purely on base, animalistic instinct eating, surviving, dominating, while masquerading as elevated spiritual guides.
And that sheer arrogance, combined with their profound spiritual emptiness, completely infuriates Jude.
You can really feel it in the text.
You can. He wants to ensure his audience has no illusions about the nature of this threat. Identifying the historical pattern is one thing, but he needs them to see the immediate reality, which leads him to unleash a series of metaphors that are just as poetic as they are devastating.
They really are devastating. Like, Jude describes these people as spots in your feasts of charity.
Yes.
And the historical context here is so vital, right?
Yeah.
These feasts of charity, or agape feasts, they were communal meals the early church shared to bond and to make sure the poorer members were fed.
Exactly. They were a safety net.
But Jude says these infiltrators are feeding themselves without fear. Like, they're showing up to a charity potluck and gorgeously consuming the resources without a second thought for anyone else. It's totally parasitic.
It is parasitic, but the metaphors that follow, they move beyond just social parasitism and into natural phenomena. Jude paints a picture of elements that fundamentally fail to fulfill their purpose.
Oh, like when he calls them clouds, they are without water, carried about of winds.
Right.
And he says they are trees whose fruit withereth, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots, plus raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame, and wandering stars to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever.
If you look at the mechanics of those natural metaphors, they all share this common theme of deceptive expectation.
How so?
Well, a raging wave is loud and powerful, but what does it actually leave on the shore?
Just foam and debris.
Exactly. And a tree in autumn should bear fruit, but these are completely barren and uprooted, twice dead.
The clouds without water metaphor is the one that really stuck with me, honestly.
It's a powerful image.
Right. Because if you're a listener living in an agrarian society, or even just someone navigating a long trout, and you see clouds rolling in, you feel an immediate sense of relief.
Yeah.
You expect rain.
You expect the system to work.
Yes, but when those clouds blow over without dropping a single drop of water, it's not just a meteorological disappointment. It is a betrayal of the promise.
Absolutely.
If you've ever had a coworker who talks a massive game in meetings, they take all the credit, but they deliver absolutely zero actual work when the deadline hits.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. You know exactly what Jude means by a cloud without water. They're all hype and zero substance. They promise spiritual relief to this community, but they deliver absolute emptiness.
And the wandering stars metaphor functions similarly, but it adds a layer of active danger.
Oh.
Yeah, in the ancient world, navigation relied entirely on fixed stars.
Right, of course.
If a star is wandering out of its course, it isn't just useless, it will actively guide a ship into the rocks. So following these false teachers doesn't just leave you thirsty, it shipwrecks your faith.
Wow, that's terrifying.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the text, Jude actually validates the severe assessment by bringing in ancient prophecy. He quotes Enoch, who he calls the seventh from Adam.
I found that detail fascinating. Like, why specifically point out that Enoch is the seventh generation from Adam?
Because it establishes the immense antiquity of the warning. By quoting a figure from the pre-flood world, Jude is demonstrating that this isn't some new, localized problem.
It's been happening forever.
Exactly. This is a cosmic pattern of human rebellion that has existed since the dawn of humanity. Enoch prophesied that the Lord would come with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment on these exact types of people, those who speak hard speeches against the divine order.
And Jude maps that ancient prophecy directly onto the current infiltrators. He says they're murmurers and complainers, walking after their own lusts.
Yes.
And the commentary highlights a very specific methodology they use, too. It says they speak great swelling words, having men's persons in admiration because of advantage.
That is the social mechanism of the con right there.
How do you mean?
They aren't relying on logic or truth. They're relying on flattery. They figure out what people want to hear, and they use grandiose, swelling language to manipulate their targets for personal, financial, or social advantage.
So what does this all mean for the listener? I mean, the person sitting in the pews or the community member just trying to live their life.
It's a tough spot to be in.
Really tough. Diagnosing a cloud without water is step one, sure. But Jude knows that simply identifying a threat doesn't neutralize the collateral damage.
Right.
The people reading this letter have friends, family members, and neighbors who are actively being manipulated by these wandering stars.
Which forces Jude to transition the letter from a diagnostic warning into a practical survival guide.
Okay, what's his advice?
He tells his audience to remember the words of the apostles who already warned them that mockers would come in the last time, separating themselves and acting purely on sensual instinct, entirely devoid of the Spirit.
He gives them a defensive baseline first, right?
Yeah.
He tells them to build themselves up on their most holy faith, to pray in the Holy Ghost, and to keep themselves in the love of God.
Yes, that is their internal armor.
But then he addresses how to handle the infected members of the community. And his instructions here really remind me of a spiritual ER triage unit.
A triage unit is the most accurate way to frame it, honestly, because Jude explicitly demands a highly nuanced, non-uniform approach. You don't treat every patient in the ER with a defibrillator, and you don't treat every deceived community member with the same severity.
That makes a lot of sense.
He divides them into distinct categories. For some, he says, have compassion, making a difference.
So for the ones who are perhaps just confused or, gently swaying toward the deception because they were flattered by those great swelling words, you don't attack them.
Right.
You approach them with mercy. You gently guide them back to the foundation.
You exercise patience. But then he outlines the critical cases. He writes, and others save with fear, pulling them out of the fire, hating even the garment spotted by the flesh.
Wow.
The language shifts from gentle pastoral care to violent, urgent rescue.
Pulling them out of the fire.
Yeah.
That implies there is zero time for polite debate or gradual persuasion.
Come on.
If someone is burning, you grab them and yank them out. But it's that last phrase that really caught me off guard. Hating even the garment spotted by the flesh.
The commentary really stresses the immense danger of the contagion here. The garment spotted by the flesh refers to the deep corruption and the lifestyle of the false teachers. Jude is acknowledging a terrifying reality about spiritual rescue operations.
Which is?
The rescuer is at severe risk of becoming infected by the very thing they are trying to save someone from.
It's like putting on a hazmat suit.
Exactly like that.
You have to rush into the quarantine zone to drag your friend out, but you have to be absolutely terrified of the pathogen they're covered in. You love the person enough to pull them from the flames, but you must maintain an absolute revulsion for the stained, burning clothes they're wearing, lest you catch fire yourself.
It's a very delicate balance.
Just reading that and imagining the listener having to carry the weight of this spiritual triage constantly scanning their environment for infiltrators, guarding their own faith, and desperately yanking friends out of the fire. It sounds incredibly exhausting.
It is an immense, almost crushing psychological burden, and Jude is a masterful communicator.
He definitely knows what he's doing.
He understands the profound anxiety he has just injected into his audience. He took them from a warm, peaceful greeting, plunged them into a terrifying reality of hidden enemies, cosmic judgment, and high-stakes triage.
Yeah, quite a journey.
If the letter ends on the image of the fire and the spotted garment, he leaves them in a state of sheer panic and hypervigilance.
Which is exactly why he ends his letter by entirely shifting the burden of ultimate security away from the audience.
Yes. The conclusion of Jude is one of the most famous doxologies or short hymns of praise in historical texts, and it serves as the ultimate pressure release valve for the community.
Let me read it. Jude writes, "Now unto him that is able to keep you from falling, and to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy."
This raises an important question regarding the theological architecture of the text. Think about the stark contrast in tone.
Oh, for sure.
We just spent this entire deep dive analyzing warnings of eternal fire, raging waves, and deceitful infiltrators. We looked at the sheer panic of having to pull people out of the flame.
It was intense.
Yet, the final note Jude leaves ringing in their ears is one of transcendent peace.
He reminds them that their ultimate safety net isn't their own vigilance. It isn't their ability to successfully spot a cloud without water. And it isn't their flawless execution in the spiritual triage unit.
No, the ultimate safety net is the only wise God our Savior. Jude concludes that to him belongs glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and ever.
That's beautiful.
After detailing all the chaos, the human failure, and the cosmic rebellion, Jude anchors the community in an unshakable divine reality. He's communicating a vital paradox here.
What's the paradox?
Yes, the internal threat is severe, the stakes are cosmic, and your responsibility to contend for the truth is great. But your ultimate preservation does not depend on your own white-knuckled grip on the faith. It depends on his power to keep you from falling.
It brings us right back to the very first verse, where he initially called them preserved in Jesus Christ. It's a complete, masterful loop that resolves all the tension he introduced.
It really is brilliant.
Which leaves you, our listener, with something to deeply consider today. The mechanics of deception that Jude describes aren't confined to the ancient world, right? They are a feature of human sociology.
Absolutely.
We've talked a lot today about the exhaustion of vigilance, of scanning the horizon for wandering stars and checking the motives of those who speak great swelling words.
It's a lot to carry.
It is. But if we spend all our energy in a state of hypervigilance, constantly looking for the spots in our feasts, we risk losing the very thing we are trying to protect. Can a community actually survive if everyone is viewing each other with constant suspicion?
That's a great point.
Or does the ultimate promise Jude ends with, the guarantee that you are kept from falling by a power greater than yourself, actually free you to build trust, to show compassion to the confused, and to love your community without being paralyzed by the fear of being deceived? It's a 2,000-year-old text, but balancing the call to fiercely defend the truth with a quiet trust that you are ultimately held secure is a tension we all still navigate today.